The moment a woman realizes you are no longer emotionally chasing her, something shifts inside her that she never expected, not because she suddenly stopped caring, but because for the first time she feels your absence instead of your attention. And most men never understand how powerful that moment really is. A woman gets used to energy, your texts, your reactions, your need to fix things, your silent hope that one more message, one more explanation, one more chance will make her see your value. And when that energy disappears, her mind does something dangerous. It starts replaying you. Most men think women lose attraction when a man becomes distant. Sometimes they do. But what almost nobody tells you is this: a woman also loses emotional certainty when the man she thought she had control over suddenly becomes emotionally unavailable. Not rude, not bitter, not loud, just unavailable. That silence hits differently. Because when you stop trying to convince someone to value you, you force them to face a question they were avoiding the entire time. What if I misjudged him? That question grows in private. Late at night, during small moments, in conversations with friends, in the seconds between distractions. And the reason it affects her so deeply is because human beings are psychologically wired to notice loss more intensely than comfort. She may have ignored your loyalty when it was always available, but once it disappears, her brain starts attaching value to what is now uncertain. This is where men usually destroy their own power. The moment they feel distance, they panic, they double text, they explain themselves too much, they ask for reassurance, they monitor her behavior like detectives trying to solve a mystery. And without realizing it, they communicate one painful thing: my emotional state depends on your attention. The problem is not caring. Caring is human. The problem is abandoning your self-respect in the process. Women are deeply emotional observers. They pay attention to how a man handles emotional pressure. Not what he says during easy moments, but who he becomes when he feels ignored, uncertain, or challenged. And when a man collapses emotionally every time affection disappears, she starts associating him with emotional instability instead of emotional strength. But when you remain calm, when you stop forcing connection, when your life continues without needing constant validation from her, something unexpected happens. She starts feeling your emotional weight again, not because you manipulated her, because emotional independence is rare. A man who can walk away peacefully without hatred creates confusion in people who expected desperation, especially in modern relationships where attention is constant and silence feels unnatural. Most people are addicted to reaction. They want to know they still affect you. They want evidence that your emotions remain attached to them. And when that evidence disappears, curiosity takes over. She starts checking small things. Has he changed? Why is he so quiet? Why doesn't he react anymore? Is there someone else? Did he finally stop caring? But the deepest reaction usually never gets spoken out loud. It is regret. Not always regret for losing you completely. Sometimes regret for underestimating your value while she had access to you, because familiarity blinds people. When someone is always available, their emotional presence becomes invisible. The human mind adapts quickly to consistency, but absence interrupts that pattern. And interruption creates awareness. This is why some women come back emotionally after a man stops chasing. Not because women enjoy games, because certainty disappeared. And uncertainty creates emotional tension. But listen carefully. The goal is not to make someone miss you. The goal is to stop abandoning yourself, trying to hold on to someone who stopped meeting you halfway. That difference changes everything. A lot of men secretly believe love means enduring emotional disrespect endlessly, that patience alone will eventually earn appreciation. But relationships do not thrive on endless pursuit. They thrive on mutual investment. The moment only one person carries the emotional weight, resentment quietly begins growing underneath the connection. And women feel resentment even when you hide it. They notice the exhaustion in your tone, the disappointment behind your kindness, the silent frustration inside your effort. Eventually, your love stops feeling grounded and starts feeling needy because it is no longer freely given. It becomes survival. That is why walking away emotionally can become transformative for a man, not because it punishes her, but because it reconnects him to himself. You start sleeping differently, thinking differently, training differently, working differently. Your mind slowly detaches from constant emotional monitoring and returns to purpose. And ironically, that is often when she finally sees the version of you she overlooked before, the version that existed before emotional dependency consumed your identity. Women are not emotionally moved by men who beg to be chosen. They are emotionally moved by men who choose themselves without becoming cruel. That balance is rare. Most men swing between two extremes, obsession or indifference, chasing or pretending not to care, but real masculine calm exists in the middle. It says, I cared about you deeply, but I will not destroy myself trying to hold on to someone uncertain about me. That energy changes how people see you, because confidence is not loudness. Confidence is emotional stability under pressure. And the truth is, many women never fully realize your value until your attention is no longer available on demand. That is when your presence becomes measurable. That is when your silence becomes loud. That is when she finally experiences life without the emotional safety net she assumed would always remain there. And for some women, that realization arrives too late. When a woman realizes you are no longer emotionally attached to her the way you once were, her reaction is rarely immediate. That is the mistake most men make. They expect dramatic endings, emotional speeches, desperate messages, but female psychology often works beneath the surface first, quietly, internally. Emotion moves through layers before it reaches behavior. At first, she may act completely unaffected. She may even appear colder than before, more distant, more casual, more controlled. And if you are emotionally weak in that moment, you will misread everything. You will think she never cared, but what you are actually seeing is emotional processing happening in real time. Most people protect their ego before they protect their heart, especially when they sense someone slipping away emotionally. A woman who once felt emotionally secure in your attention suddenly feels instability, and instability creates awareness. Now your absence becomes noticeable. The good morning texts that used to arrive automatically are gone. The emotional reassurance she could always access suddenly feels uncertain. The energy she once took for granted becomes unavailable. And this is where her mind starts comparing versions of you. The old you chased, the new you observes. The old you overexplained yourself, the new you protects your peace. The old you waited for her validation. The new you moves through life without constantly needing emotional confirmation. That contrast is psychologically powerful because people often do not recognize value until behavior changes. Human beings notice interruption more than consistency. If someone always gives attention, attention feels normal. But when that pattern breaks, emotional awareness increases immediately. Suddenly she notices your silence in places where your energy used to exist, and silence is uncomfortable, not because silence itself hurts, but because silence forces reflection. Distraction disappears, certainty disappears, control disappears. Now she begins wondering things she never asked herself before. Why did he stop trying? Did I push him too far? Was he emotionally stronger than I thought? Is he happier without me? That last question becomes especially painful because many women unconsciously expect emotional permanence from men who deeply cared about them. They assume your attention will always remain available somewhere in the background, even after arguments, even after disrespect, even after inconsistency. So when your emotional energy truly leaves, it creates shock, not always visible shock, internal shock. And this is why emotional withdrawal affects people more deeply than emotional drama. Drama creates noise, withdrawal creates mystery. A man arguing constantly still looks emotionally attached. A man begging still looks emotionally attached. Even anger can communicate emotional dependence. But calm detachment sends a completely different message. It says, I no longer need this connection to survive emotionally. That realization changes how she sees you. Now listen carefully because this part matters. Women are highly responsive to emotional energy, not just words. A man can say, I'm moving on, while secretly hoping she chases him. Women often sense that contradiction. But when your behavior genuinely changes, when your emotional center stops revolving around her, your energy becomes impossible to fake. You stop checking your phone every minute. You stop building your day around her mood. You stop needing every interaction to reassure your worth. And that shift creates emotional gravity. Because grounded men are rare. Most people today are emotionally reactive. They panic when attention changes. They lose themselves inside romantic uncertainty. But the man who remains composed without becoming cold communicates something extremely attractive: self-respect. Self-respect changes relationship dynamics completely. The reason many women become emotionally confused when a man stops chasing is because attraction is deeply connected to emotional perception. If she once saw you as emotionally dependent and suddenly you become emotionally centered, her perception of your value changes in real time. Now she starts remembering moments differently. Your patience looks different. Your loyalty looks different. Your calmness during difficult moments suddenly carries more weight. Even your flaws become softer in her memory because distance alters emotional perspective. This is why some women revisit old conversations months later and suddenly understand what they failed to appreciate in the moment. Time creates clarity that emotions sometimes block. But there is another truth most men never hear. Sometimes when a woman realizes you are no longer interested, she feels fear instead of sadness. Fear that she lost someone genuine. Fear that the next man will not care the same way. Fear that she confused emotional stability with weakness. Because modern dating has trained many people to chase intensity instead of consistency. Chaos feels exciting, uncertainty feels addictive, but emotional peace often goes unnoticed until it disappears. And when a grounded man finally walks away emotionally, the silence he leaves behind feels heavier than expected. Not because he was perfect, because he was safe. And emotional safety becomes extremely valuable once it is gone. This is why some women return unexpectedly, not always because they suddenly fell deeply in love, sometimes because losing access to your emotional presence forced them to confront emotions they avoided while you were available. But this is where you must stay disciplined. The moment she feels your distance, she may test your emotional position, a random message, a small reaction, a subtle reminder that she still exists in your mind. And many men fail here instantly. They mistake temporary curiosity for transformed commitment. Do not confuse attention with intention. A woman missing your energy does not automatically mean she is ready to value you correctly. Sometimes people simply miss access, they miss comfort, they miss emotional security. That does not always mean they are prepared to build something healthy. This is why emotional maturity matters. The strongest thing a man can do is remain honest with himself about what he truly experienced, not the fantasy, not potential, reality. Did she genuinely respect you? Did she reciprocate effort? Did the relationship bring peace into your life or constant emotional confusion? These questions matter because many men become addicted to being wanted instead of being valued. There is a difference. Being wanted feeds ego. Being valued feeds peace. And once a man understands that difference, he stops chasing temporary emotional highs that cost him his dignity. He stops trying to earn love through suffering. He stops believing emotional pain is proof of emotional depth. That transformation changes everything. Because the moment you genuinely stop needing validation from someone who is uncertain about you, you become emotionally dangerous in the healthiest possible way. Now your attention is earned. Now your energy has standards. Now your silence carries meaning. And when a woman realizes that version of you is real, that is when her emotional reaction becomes impossible to ignore. There is a moment many women never admit out loud, a quiet moment where they realize the man they thought would always stay emotionally available has mentally moved on. And when that realization becomes real, it does something powerful to the female mind. It removes certainty, and certainty is often what people depend on more than love itself. Because as long as she believes she still has emotional access to you, part of her stays relaxed, even if she acts distant, even if she pulls away, even if she becomes inconsistent. Somewhere inside, she assumes your attention is still waiting for her. But the day she feels that emotional door slowly closing, her perspective changes. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. Suddenly, she notices your emotional absence in ordinary moments. A song reminds her of you. A place triggers memory. A quiet night becomes louder than expected. And this is what most men fail to understand about female psychology. Women often process emotions through emotional atmosphere, not direct confrontation. Men usually look for obvious signs, but women often feel emotional shifts internally long before they express them externally. So while you think nothing is affecting her, she may already be replaying conversations in her head, re-examining moments she dismissed before, wondering why your energy feels different now. And what unsettles her the most is not your silence alone, it is your peace inside that silence. That part changes everything, because a man who becomes peaceful without her forces a woman to confront a difficult emotional reality. Maybe he no longer needs me emotionally. And people react strongly when they stop feeling emotionally necessary, especially if they became comfortable receiving your loyalty without fully appreciating it. This is why many women suddenly become more attentive after a man emotionally detaches. They start noticing details they ignored before, your discipline, your calmness, your consistency. The emotional safety you brought into her life, things that once looked ordinary suddenly feel rare because absence creates contrast. Psychologically, human beings value what feels limited. And unlimited attention often loses perceived value over time, not because your love lacked worth, but because familiarity reduces emotional urgency. Once your energy becomes less accessible, the emotional brain responds differently. Now she starts asking herself uncomfortable questions. What if I pushed away someone genuine? What if I confused patience for weakness? What if no one else understands me the same way? Those thoughts become heavier during emotional loneliness because loneliness changes perspective. The excitement of attention from strangers fades quickly when emotional depth is missing. Surface level validation can distract a person temporarily, but it rarely replaces real emotional connection. And this is where regret begins forming quietly, not movie scene regret, not dramatic regret, real regret. The kind that arrives slowly when someone realizes your presence brought emotional stability they can no longer access. But here is the truth. Most men are too emotionally attached to accept. Sometimes the woman who misses you still will not change enough to deserve access to you again. That truth matters because many men spend years waiting for emotional realization from women who were never truly prepared to meet them halfway. They romanticize potential instead of respecting reality. And when a woman finally returns emotionally, they immediately reopen doors without asking the most important question: has anything actually changed? Missing you is not the same as valuing you. Feeling lonely is not the same as being committed. Temporary emotions are not permanent transformation. This is why emotionally mature men observe behavior instead of getting hypnotized by emotional words, because attraction can return quickly. Loneliness can create nostalgia quickly. But genuine emotional growth takes time, accountability, and consistent action. And women know this too. A woman who truly respects you will not only say she misses you, she will show emotional consistency. She will communicate differently. She will stop playing emotional games that once created confusion. She will approach the connection with more humility because losing you forced her to recognize your value. But if nothing changes except temporary attention, then the cycle repeats itself. This is why your emotional discipline matters so much after detachment. Many men become strongest right before they sabotage themselves. The moment she returns with curiosity, attention, or affection, they emotionally collapse back into old patterns. Suddenly their standards disappear. Their peace disappears, their emotional independence disappears, and the woman notices immediately because confidence cannot be performed for long. It must become part of your identity. The strongest position a man can reach is emotional self-control, not emotional numbness, not pretending not to care, real self-control. The ability to feel deeply without abandoning your dignity. That kind of masculinity is rare now. Most men either suppress emotion completely or drown inside it. But grounded emotional strength lives between those extremes. It allows you to love without losing yourself, to care without begging, to walk away without hatred. And ironically, that energy creates the deepest emotional impact on women, because when you stop trying to force love, your value becomes clearer, not only to her, but to yourself. You begin realizing how much emotional energy you wasted trying to prove your worth to someone who should have recognized it naturally. You stop measuring your value through delayed replies, mixed signals, and inconsistent affection. Your standards rise because your self-respect rises, and women can feel that shift immediately. A man who no longer fears losing people behaves differently. He speaks differently. His attention becomes calmer, more intentional, less desperate. He stops chasing validation and starts protecting his peace. That emotional transition changes your entire presence. Now, when you walk into a room, you are not searching for approval. Now, when someone pulls away emotionally, you do not panic. Now, when a woman tests your boundaries, you remain composed instead of emotionally reactive. And the reason this affects women so deeply is because emotional steadiness creates trust, it creates safety, it creates mystery. Most importantly, it creates respect. A woman may forget compliments, she may forget arguments, but she rarely forgets the man who quietly became stronger after experiencing emotional disappointment. Because strength without bitterness is unforgettable. And when she finally realizes you became that man, sometimes admiration arrives at the exact moment access disappears forever. The hardest thing for a woman to accept is not that you stopped texting first. It is not that you became busier. It is not even that you moved on emotionally. The hardest thing for her to accept is realizing that the version of you who once gave endless attention no longer exists, because people become emotionally attached to patterns. Your consistency, your availability, your patience, your willingness to stay even when things became emotionally exhausting. And when those patterns disappear, the emotional comfort attached to them disappears too. Suddenly she feels the emotional space you used to fill without effort. And human beings often notice emotional value only after silence replaces it. This is why emotional withdrawal feels so powerful, not because it is manipulation, because absence forces clarity. A woman who once felt completely certain of your emotional availability now feels uncertainty instead. And uncertainty creates emotional tension that the human mind struggles to ignore. Questions begin repeating in her thoughts. Why doesn't he react anymore? Why does he seem calmer without me? Did I lose someone who truly cared? And what hurts the most is when she realizes your peace is genuine, not fake distance, not revenge, not emotional games, real peace. Because when a man truly heals emotionally, his energy changes in a way that cannot be imitated. He no longer moves from fear of losing someone. He no longer treats attention like oxygen. He no longer sacrifices his self-respect just to keep emotional access to a person who gave inconsistent effort. That transformation is impossible to ignore. Women are extremely intuitive when it comes to emotional shifts. Even when they cannot explain it logically, they feel when a man emotionally detaches in a healthy way. Your conversations feel different, your attention feels different. Your emotional reactions become calmer. You stop trying to control outcomes, and that calmness creates emotional weight because emotional stability is rare. Especially today, most people are emotionally impulsive. They react instantly to rejection, distance, or uncertainty. But a man who remains grounded communicates strength without needing to announce it. And women remember that energy because it feels safe and powerful at the same time. This is where many women begin experiencing emotional contradiction. Part of her respects your growth. Part of her misses your presence. Part of her wonders whether she made a mistake. And another part feels frustrated that you no longer revolve around her emotionally. That contradiction can become overwhelming because attraction often increases when emotional certainty disappears. Once she realizes she can no longer predict your emotional availability, your presence starts feeling valuable again. But this is the moment where your self-respect matters most. Because many men spend months becoming emotionally stronger only to return to situations that destroyed their peace in the first place. The attention they once begged for finally arrives, and suddenly they forget every sleepless night, every moment of confusion, every emotional imbalance that forced them to grow. Do not let temporary emotion erase permanent lessons. Growth means recognizing patterns clearly. Growth means understanding that someone missing you does not automatically mean they are prepared to love you correctly. And growth means finally believing that your value does not decrease simply because someone failed to recognize it on time. That realization changes a man completely. Now you stop forcing connections that drain your spirit. Now you stop chasing mixed signals, hoping they become consistency. Now you stop interpreting emotional chaos as passion. Instead, you start valuing peace, mutual effort, emotional maturity, respect. And once a man reaches that mindset, something incredible happens. He becomes magnetic without trying, because people are naturally drawn toward those who are emotionally whole, not perfect. Whole, women feel safest around men who can control their emotions without suppressing them, men who can love deeply without losing themselves, men who remain calm during emotional uncertainty instead of collapsing into insecurity. That energy stands out immediately. And ironically, many women only fully understand your emotional value after you stop trying to convince them to see it, because your absence removes distraction. Now she has nothing left except memory, comparison, and reflection. She remembers how patient you were, how consistent you were, how emotionally safe you made her feel, how you stayed calm when most people would have become cruel. And sometimes those memories hit hardest when life becomes emotionally difficult, because emotionally grounded people are rare. Loyalty is rare. Peace is rare. That is why some women return emotionally long after you stopped expecting them to. Not because they suddenly became different overnight, but because distance finally gave them perspective. And whether you choose to reopen that door depends entirely on your standards now, not your loneliness. That is the evolution most men never reach, the ability to choose connection from strength instead of emotional hunger. Because once you stop fearing abandonment, relationships stop controlling your identity. You no longer beg for reassurance. You no longer panic when someone becomes distant. You no longer measure your worth through another person's attention. And that freedom changes every relationship you will ever have, including the relationship with yourself. At the end of the day, the woman who realizes you are no longer interested experiences something deeper than simple loss. She experiences contrast. She compares the emotional certainty she once had with the emotional distance she now feels. And in that contrast, your value becomes clearer than it ever was before. But by then, you may already be gone emotionally, not angry, not bitter, just finally at peace. And peace is dangerous because once a man truly finds it, he stops accepting relationships that require him to abandon himself just to feel loved. So let me ask you something. Have you ever walked away from someone you deeply cared about because you realized your peace mattered more than chasing their attention? Write your answer in the comments. And if this video spoke to something you have been feeling silently for a long time, like the video, subscribe, and share it with a friend who needs to hear this before they lose themselves trying to hold on to someone who stopped valuing them properly.